Hello and welcome back to episode 3 of the Big Douglas Birdcast. Today's edition is the Easter Snowstorm edition, which seems to be a tradition in the state of Minnesota. So it's almost a good thing that we're quarantined and locked down today. Of course, individuals that would have spent time with family members and had meals, this is kind of a bummer, but we'll make do the best that we can. On today's episode, I want to talk about some rare birds that have shown up in the state. I've got a couple of fun little side stories that go with those, a couple that don't, but we'll kind of use those as research opportunities nonetheless. And then I want to talk about a yard program that I put together with a moderately good-sized group of friends, and how much fun we had with it, and maybe kind of give you the blueprint to do something similar yourself if there's others, family members or just birders in the community that you'd be interested in doing a kind of digital social program with. And then after that, I'm going to talk about a couple of eBird specific. One's a pretty cool hack that I didn't know you could do, and they don't offer it directly in the interface, but you can make eBird do it, which is really kind of cool. And then a feature I didn't see before but seems to be there now, which is related to bar charts relating to your yard list. So the ability for you to see in the history of your own yard and reports when you first see a species, when the bulk of its observations are, and then when they start to trail off. So it gives you an idea of how well you've covered your own yard, your own spaces and everything. And then looking through the list, just a couple other random reference points as we run through stuff. So the first thing that I did want to talk about in this intro segment, though, is finding a new normal. And obviously, almost without exception, everyone has been impacted in some way, shape, or form by coronavirus, the related quarantine and lockdown elements, and generally, the authorities desire to have us limit our trips, have us limit how far away from home we're going, what communities we're visiting and stuff, to reduce the spread of COVID-19. In that process, I've noted that, of course, I haven't lost my job, I haven't been furloughed or anything like that, so I'm extremely fortunate, but at the same time, my life has changed quite significantly. Normally, I would drive to work 4 or 5 days a week, just depends, maybe get one day at home a week, and that drives 32 miles both directions. And being a bird watcher, I have the desire to get the job done as quickly as I can so I can go bird watching after work. And with that being the case, I choose to get up right near 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in the car within 35 minutes, drive the 32 miles across the metro in the dark, work my 8 hours, and then get done by 2 or 2:30, just depending on what work has to offer that day, so that I can go bird watching. That's no longer a thing. I don't have to do that drive anymore. So I could choose to sleep all that extra time. Instead of the near 1 hour drive to and from work, I could absorb those 2 hours, get even more sleep, or just kind of generally slack off, whatever it might be. But I found the need that I've always had to have structure, have some kind of order, something that I understand this is what's going to happen on a daily basis. Now, a lot of people are a little more free-flowing than that, and more power to you, and congratulations, but I need structure in my life. So I want to at least talk about that new normal, and that I'm forcing myself to do things that I wouldn't say are out of the ordinary, but I'm forcing myself to do things to keep structure, to keep a schedule, to give myself some regularity that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I gave myself 40 minutes, 45 minutes in the morning of extra sleep. So now I get up at 5:45 a.m. Monday through Friday. But what's different now is I immediately go out for a walk. And this is occurring before the sun is up. So I'm getting out of the house, I've got my binoculars with me as the light is eventually coming up, and I'm listening to pre-dawn song. I'm walking around the neighborhood, I'm putting about 2 miles in, maybe 2.5. There's a couple of small trails relatively close by, And this is giving me an opportunity to hear some song elements and stuff I don't have a lot of regularity with. Now, a lot of it's repetitious, and there's nothing super exciting about, the American Robins and Song Sparrows kicking off early in the morning. But what it does allow me is the opportunity to get to know, some of the daily machinations of these bird species. When exactly do they start singing? And I've already started to notice things like the eastern meadowlark that has set up shop across the street in this weedy lot. It starts after all of the other birds, at least all of the other early risers. So northern cardinals are going pretty quickly after I step out the door. Song sparrows start up relatively quickly thereafter. The American robins are up relatively early. And within about 20 or 30 minutes, then I'm noticing the eastern meadowlark will begin its first songs of the day. The red-winged blackbirds might be waking up. The mallards seem to already be up, flying around even in the dark, chasing at least during these springtime moments and everything. So it's just something really interesting to see, okay, well, when do I get the first crow from the pheasant rooster that is in the neighborhood and everything? Getting to know some of these elements really is kind of an interesting education. It adds a little extra background to things on it. And speaking of eastern meadowlark, I mentioned in a previous episode, I've kind of chosen them as my yard avatar for 2020. I'm now on day 18, so 18 days in a row that I've gotten up, opened up a window, gone out for a walk in the neighborhood. I've gotten the eastern meadowlark. I think that's in serious danger today with the snowstorm. I have cracked the patio door 4 times today already. It's about noon and have not heard him making any noise yet. I'm debating going out in the snow just to find out if I can get him for a 19th day, because I was kind of hoping I could push this past a month or more in a row with a singing eastern meadowlark. But again, it's a goal. It's something for me to focus on, give me an opportunity to do some things. And then back to the schedule, I come back in, I eat my breakfast, I start work, and I finish work at more like 3 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock. But there's still a net gain for me, because normally it would take me at least an hour to get home anyway in the afternoon. So I'm still where I was before. And then this puts me in a position to maybe go for a walk or a hike at Lake Elmo Park, which is near the house. I can still socially isolate or distance from others. And then maybe an opportunity to go for a walk with my wife in the neighborhood. Just depends, on the given day. But again, the whole point for me and just what I wanted to share with everyone is that I'm not just letting myself sit in this state of trying to get back to where I was. I've created that new normal for myself. And I think it's important just to find the balance that you need in life. Find something you can latch onto and say, okay, this is the thing that I do now. This is my new normal. And then fit in the other elements of your life with it. Give yourself some stability and, kind of just get through the whole process. So without any further ado, we'll jump into some of the recorded segments from my iPad as we jump through various website pieces, talk about rarities, talk about the other stuff in there. So thanks for coming back for episode 3, and hope you enjoy the rest of the content. All right, welcome back. We're going to talk about some rare birds that have shown up in the last week or so, and maybe kind of jump into a few bits and pieces and elements around those particular birds. So we're going to go back to eBird. I know this information in advance because of the alerts. We talked about that section before. It's in the lower right-hand corner of the screen right now. I'm not going to jump into that because I've already kind of written down the list of what we're going to look for and jump into details on it. So I'm just going to hit the species maps. We've seen this before. When this comes up, it does default to year-round all years, but let's just go ahead into current year. And let's put Eurasian widgeon in here. Let this pop up, and we can see that they are more of a European species. They occur all over the place, but they have been making quite the inroads in the US. But let's zoom this into Minnesota. And I'm going to hit the show points sooner. We've seen that button before as well. So up here in, where are we at? Are we in Clay? We're in Becker County again. So in Becker County, Eurasian widgeon was found. This particular Eurasian widgeon was found by Bo Schroyer. up here at Hamden Slough. I've been up to Hamden Slough before. Absolutely beautiful area. Becker County, if you've never been to Becker County, I highly recommend visiting it in the spring and summer. The National Wildlife Refuge space up there is absolutely phenomenal and worth a visit. For some of you that really tune in and pay attention, you may remember Bo Schroyer's name as he's the individual. Him and his family had a brambling show up at their feeders in their front yard last winter. And it created quite a stir. That's a really challenging bird. Like, you might get one every 10 years, though we have had some interesting records show up in the last few. Last year was quite a wonderful one. It showed up at the deepest cold that we could possibly have in this state. I happened to be on a northern circuit with friends Kevin Smith and Jerry Hoekstra, and we were up in Lake of the Woods and Koochiching County area, and we had gotten up that morning, the day after that bird had been found. It was -40 when we stepped outside. And it was absolutely insanely cold, and we ended up arcing our way towards Bo's family's home in Becker County so that we could see that bird. We got it, and then we got chased all the way back to the cities by a snowstorm. So we drove, south, got up to 94, and got back into the cities. It flurried the entire time, but there was a massive snowstorm behind us, chasing us all the way back in. But back on the Eurasian widgeon, so Bo found that bird, saw by a couple of other birders up in that area. But one thing I want to do here is, when you look at something like this, I think something that's beneficial to look at is to understand what's the real kind of longer term rarity level of a bird like this. Eurasian widgeon are sort of an annual. Somebody seems to find one every year in the state. It certainly seems to happen more in these northwestern areas, but if you change your drop down here from year-round current year to past 10 years, this gives you a decent idea so that in 10 years, these are the locations in the state. If I just pull that back a little bit, these are the locations in the state where someone has found a Eurasian widgeon before. And a random linkage to this story is Eurasian widgeon, actually about 7 years ago or so, is the first rare bird I ever found. So back in 2014, so that'd be 6-7 years ago on there. I'm gonna pop this open. These pictures actually are Jerry Hoekstra's pictures. I contacted Kevin. It's kind of the odd connection to this whole thing. I was learning some of my bird watching skill set from Kevin Smith. We'd been out together that day, and we finished, actually. He headed home and I headed out for more birding, went down to Lake Bilsby in Dakota and Goodhue County, and found this bird from a very long distance away. You can see these shots are pretty grainy. This was probably 3/4 of a mile away, and found this bird, called Kevin. He had gotten home by that point, told him about the bird. Then he contacted Jerry Hoekstra, whom I'd only met once or twice. We didn't really bird much together at the time, and he got there before Kevin got there, got on the bird as well, and got some pictures and stuff like that. So just a fun little kind of connection. But a lot of times this is something I'll do if I don't really understand the full depth of the rarity of a bird or a species or whatever. I like to get an idea of, like, okay, where do these show up? How often do they show up? Things of that sort. And these can give you an idea of where you can expect/hope to find a bird. And it gives you maybe a little bit greater context for finding them, yourself on it. So another interesting rarity that showed up was a surf scoter. Oh, helps if you type it correctly. So we're going to go surf scoter. And this is on past 10 years, which you can see there's a lot of them. So surf scoters is not super rare, but in the spring they're much more rare. We do want to go to current year. And we will see in the current year, the only one in the state is down here in Winona. Lisa Reed found this particular bird. I couldn't immediately tell that from eBird, other than the fact that hers is the first entry at the bottom here, so it seems to imply that the first person to report it was her, but that's not always the case. And so I actually found a little bit more context by going into the MOU data and finding Diedrich Benz's record, whom doesn't use eBird, but I know that he is a longtime county lister and actually lives very close to where this bird was found. And he actually referenced Lisa Reed found it and had reported it on a Facebook group for area birders around Winona. So I think it's their Audubon group down there has that. So a really great find on Lake Winona. Several people appear to have gone after that bird as well. But the reason why this is kind of funny is a segment that is coming up in this episode will be talking about a yard program that I put together through Facebook. And we will connect back to this bird in a quite humorous way. It was an extremely large amount of fun. But this is another bird. I mentioned it just a moment ago. You can see that there's a bigger concentration over on Lake Michigan. So as these birds are coming back north, they have a pretty tight migration path depending on where the birds are located and where they're heading back to. And we do see the occasional one kind of drift west a bit, and then they end up coming up the river, Mississippi River, and the flyway is a little bit different for them at that point. So it is interesting though, if we drop this list down, and instead of just going to past 10 years, what if we did March through May? So basically talk about this spring migration window and then do past 10 years. So I'm going to select both of those and do set date range. See, this gives a little bit more context and interest. We have that really thick flight path in the lower right corner of this map showing Lake Michigan with a lot of sightings. We also have a lot of sightings that are coming up through Indiana and Ohio right on the edge of the map here. And of course, we have a bit of a collection point up on Lake Superior because up around Duluth, because this is a really great collection point for where it is. But look how few of those birds are showing up in the bulk of Minnesota in the spring. So when you see some of these seabirds, they're exceedingly common in the fall, but very uncommon in the spring. And it's all having to do with their flight paths. Because if we then change this, and we do, let's say, the August to November time frame. So we could actually do something like this. Let's go August and let's hit December in there too, just to get it through the end of the year and do a date range on that. Now you can see it's all over the state. So surf scoter is still not super common, but in the fall, its flight path is very different. You have birds coming out of the Arctic, coming out of the north, and there seems to just be this flood straight down. Now, they might have some great collection points along these big lakes because they are sea ducks, they are divers, but they're showing up even in the Dakotas. They're just cascading down on it. So I just thought it was an interesting, point or piece or something to point out about a bird, that its spring migration and its spring rarity is much different than its fall rarity, and something to be aware of. It happens with other scoters as well. I actually found a white-winged scoter last year at a sewage pond, and that was the first time I think I'd ever seen one in the spring as opposed to the fall. So just kind of a neat little side item to look at. Let's go into, and again, I can't type. And we're going to go white-winged, not scoter. We are going to go to white-winged dove. And let's go to year-round current year. So there was a white-winged dove that was photographed by a homeowner, Sarah Johnson, relatively near Tympanicus Prairie, so probably within eyesight of it. So she was able to get a picture of a white-winged dove. I'm going to pop this open just so you can quick see the picture that was in the record on it. And you can see the white wing. It's like a little white crescent, kind of a thick white crescent actually, on what otherwise appears to be, I don't know, a generic dove body. Looks sort of like a mourning dove, and then you've got this white wing. Definitely something I wanted to point out. Really cool bird, especially to get from your home or and what have you, but something for individuals to be aware of when you have an influx of mourning doves in your area. Birds like this will fall in with other birds if they're relatively similar, and for some reason white-winged doves are pretty good roamers. This year it doesn't look necessarily like it, but if we do hit the past 10 years again on this, we can see that we get a smattering of them. They're not really hotspot birds. if you noticed on the previous bird we looked at, with the surf scoter, a lot of them were at hotspot locations because you're talking about water birds, you're talking about public boat access points, or park locations that can get you access to these bodies of water. But in this case, white-winged doves, they're not really hitting, hot spots for habitat or whatever. These are birds that are relatively lost or, out of their normal range, and they're picking up yard feeders basically. And that's how I've come to understand them or know them across the state historically, is that white-winged doves, when they do show up, somebody's finding them at their yard feeders. So maybe an argument for you to put out yard feeders, but certainly an argument to take a look at those mourning doves. If you see large groups of them on roadside somewhere out in the countryside, anything's possible. Pay attention for those white, thick white bars, and you can see it in flight too. It really shows up when you get a look at that. So this white-winged dove was up in Polk County, so there's been a lot of action up there, Becker and Polk. A lot of good stuff showing up, and staying pretty much in the same region. Let's go back to current year, pop this. Back to mountain bluebird. If you remember from a earlier episode, we talked about a mountain bluebird up in Becker County. Now there's a mountain bluebird that was found. Let me zoom this in a little bit. So this was the original one. This was near this Dunton Locks County Park. We talked about Mark Ottness's find. Now Patrick Bose found one as well. So he found a really great male. He even notes in here that he kept his distance, didn't want to scare the bird off or anything. So a bit tough to see, but just that nice, beautiful electric blue from Mountain Bluebird. Very cool find. This was Clay County, so just over the border. So there's been a lot of action up there when you consider Polk, Becker, and Clay. A lot of really good stuff. And as well, you get up into Clay County, you're talking Felton Prairie area, some absolutely fantastic places to visit. So if you could make a weekend trip of it, once all of this passes over and you find an opportunity to get out of town and you're just looking for something different, try the prairies. Try this pothole region. These national wildlife refuges, you can get a lot of really cool stuff. There's some wildlife loop drives up there around Detroit Lakes. They have a bird festival there every year. This is just absolutely amazing space to check out and really understand, some of these sections that are kind of considered the duck factory of the United States. We get a lot of that in the Dakotas, but we still have these really amazing segments here in Minnesota as well. On the mountain bluebird, I thought it was of value to note this. This is a western bird, so we're getting a western vagrancy for this particular bird. It's a much different vagrancy than some of the others. When you consider white-winged dove, you're talking about a bird of the south, that has kind of released north on us. But in this particular case, you're talking about a migrant bird coming from the south that typically ends up straddling the mountains and the hills and stuff around it. And you can see in southwest and western edges of North Dakota and South Dakota, that's where you get your main concentrations. And then through those plains regions and pothole regions, there's very few because they seem to really enjoy hillier terrain. I have camped in southwest South Dakota, Black Hills, Custer State Park, in that area, and it was relatively easy to find them. I had them in my campground within sight of my tent when I was near the city of Custer. It was very cool. But we do get them in Minnesota, and you can see just on this year alone, there's vagrants into that southwest corner of Wisconsin, another one right on the eastern edge of South Dakota, almost in Minnesota. So we definitely see them pop in there, and if we do a past 10 years on this bird as well, let this kind of redraft. We go into color mode because there's a lot of sightings. Let's just go ahead and zoom this a bit. There we go. Now we got our spots. We even get these around the cities. A few years back, we had someone find one just down in Dakota County. You can see at the bottom of the list here, 313. I was able to get on that bird as well. And in fact, I think my wife was able to see that bird as well. It was another beautiful male. A lot of people came out for that. But not an impossible bird in the state, but you can definitely see in the last 10 years, it's not like these are ultra super common. So if the opportunity presents itself, highly recommend you go after one. Just need a drink here. All right, and the last bird I want to actually there are two more birds I want to talk about. The next one is from Nolan Meyer. Actually, found a white-faced ibis. This was really recently. White-faced ibis. Oh yeah, and we're on 10 years, so let's go back to current year on it, and you can see it down here in the southwest corner. So white-faced ibis is seen pretty much every year in the state. It's regular. It's not ultra rare, but at the same time, it's not super common. We don't really have much for breeding space for white-faced ibis anymore, and this bird is at the kind of front leading edge of this species in this space. So a cool find from Nolan. And specifically, I wanted to bring this up. I've birded with Nolan a couple of different times. Really great dude. He reached out to me after the last video and made a comment relating to using eBird and finding county records, or that county records are in existence. So one thing I wanted to do is reference that and say thank you to Nolan for pointing this out. We talked about, well, how many county records are out there, and one of the things we did was search in MOU, and we kind of just got this list of stuff out there. But you can do something kind of similar here as well. So let's just talk about Lyon County. Lyon County, Minnesota. Open this region up. So in here in Lyon County, there should be somewhere on this list should be an ibis. So let's do a search for ibis. This was something we did in the last episode. So here's white-faced ibis. So if I click on this white-faced ibis, what I'm going to be given is the species page for it, but I wasn't paying attention to the fact that it is the species page in context to where you were when you got to it. So you can see just above the title line, we can see data for Lyon, Minnesota, United States, and then we've got this list set up and everything. So it's giving some really excellent photos, not necessarily from this location, it's just from the Macaulay Library, which we also talked about. And then we start to get some statistics. So in the statistics, it's saying there are 45 eBird reports of white-faced ibis in Lyon County, and I have 0. And then there are 14 photographs of those 45, and I have 0. So obviously I don't have any records in Lyon County for white-faced ibis, though I have seen white-faced ibis in the state. I actually think it was Rice County last year where I got my first one on it. So in some cases, you can then take a look deeper at the records depending on what you're doing. But in this case, you can't click on that 45. It's not giving all of those results in, but you get your bar charts and everything, and then you've got the photographs. So it will jump you, if I click on that 14 in there, we'll be able to see the photographs from Lyon County, and presumably then the photographs that were put up relatively recently. In fact, I think I recognize the second one here, this flight shot. I think this is Nolan. Nope, this is Frank Fabro. So Frank Fabro went down and got that. It was Black Rush Lake WPA down in Lyon County on that. So you can see some of that stuff and get an idea of how many county records there were or are for a given region and location. So just a nice little tip from Nolan Meyer. Appreciate him pointing that out on there. One thing I am going to do with this particular bird, though, is I want to come back, go to the species maps. Let's go to current year, and let's go back to that ibis. White-faced ibis. All right. Zoom this in, show us our points. Yep. All right, so that's the one, but let's zoom in on this a bit. So this is down in Lyon County. I'm going to zoom this back. We're just going to go up northeast of there, and we're going to see the city of Marshall. So I've stayed in Marshall a couple of times. I actually got to stay at Garrett Wee's house last year while I was running around the state quite a bit. Appreciate him giving me a space to sleep while I was running around. Lyon County, if you get down here, is another really interesting county. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Reach out to Garrett Wee if you can. He can point you in a great direction. So can Nolan. But just southwest of town here, you get Camden State Park, which is a really great state park, a lot of good hiking out there. But just east of that is where this particular ibis was found. This kind of waterfowl protection area, WPA, you have this, you can see this swampy area on the south side of the road, and then on the north side there's a big open water pond. I found some really good stuff out there, and then additionally there happens to be the Lyon County landfill there that you can see on the map near the top edge of it. Garrett and others have found really great birds out here over the years. This is an excellent spot. It's a must stop because it's super easy. It's as a between place, if you're in the far southwest part of the state, you almost always end up coming back to the cities through Marshall. This is a great place to stop along the way if you've got the time. Give the swamp a listen, or the WPA, this marshy area. Take a look at the lake. There might be a redneck grebe on there. I saw one in an adult and a young one in one of my stops. You have the landfill, so if it's gull season, there could be an extremely, great gathering of gulls, maybe some terns. A lot of good stuff in this space, but just, something I wanted to mention along with the rare bird, that this is a really neat place. And I think just southeast of town, there's a traditionally excellent location. I kind of didn't prompt myself on this, but I got it right. So just southeast of town. So here you are in Marshall, southeast on 59, right where this curve is, there's a CHS kind of elevator and processing location. Out the back of this, in what looks just like a field, has been a lot of standing water for quite some time. And there have been a really great number of birds found in this kind of field space when it's wet, and it usually is. I know I've pulled into this kind of parking edge right where this little loop is off this building and just scanned out into this space. So it doesn't look like it from this satellite imagery, but it is traditionally loaded with water. It's a great shorebird spot. It's a great waterfall spot, migratory zone, really excellent location. There's a ton of really good spots around here, and actually in town, in university property, there's also some excellent natural space right here that you can see. So just behind the school, ball fields and stuff. This zone here, Garrett and Nolan find some excellent birds in this space as well. We absolutely cleaned up there on a spring morning last year and really kind of took care of my Lyon County needs for the year in this space. So something to really look out for when you see these rarities is what other opportunities are around for you. And then use these tool sets to kind of dig a little bit deeper than just that one rarity. Give yourself an idea of where birds are showing up, what their regularity is, and just the things to be aware of when you're out birding on your own, and see what you can find. Let's move on to the next. All right, we are back. We're going to talk about a yard program that I put together, but also something I just noticed out on eBird that I thought was kind of cool. It references back to the bar charts that we've talked about before, but I wanted to reference this just because I thought it was kind of cool, and so we'll kind of just merge these together since this is a really short item. Back on the eBird webpage here, from a tracking standpoint, I certainly track yard totals and patch totals. So you can use this interface, I think we've talked about this before, to add your yard location. It's a personal location. But I noticed, and I think this is new, I don't think I noticed it before either, that I was doing a really good job of ignoring it, that there's now a bar charts link for your locations that you have in these particular setups. So Lake Elmo home, Douglas, and you can see I've got 104 lifetime just in the Lake Elmo yard, and then 40 for the year. And there's a link here for bar charts. This I thought was kind of fascinating. So as this opens up, this is the bar chart for bird species in my yard, and that means all of this data is from me. Because I'm the only one that uses this location, this spot, or whatever. So if we dig in a little bit tighter here and take a look, it gives us a good idea, it gives me a good idea of when is the earliest I've seen something. Now we can see like mourning dove, I've kind of got here almost center screen. I have some winter sightings. We have them overwinter in the neighborhood, a little more on the east side, but on warmish days, they can come to our feeders every now and then. But you can see the bulk of that bird, and you can see the increase in regularity of my reports. So the more that you bird from home, the more you get these views and stuff. And some of this stuff is kind of cool. If we look at killdeer specifically, on here we can see the third week is when I start blipping the radar a little bit on killdeer, and then usually by the fourth week of September, that's when they've trailed off. You know, you can see when you have gap data, when you have, oh, I don't have any killdeer in that space, but they certainly should have been around. So in that August time frame, you know, we can see that I've got a week gap in there or whatever. But it gives you a good idea of like, there's certainly arrival dates and exit or departure dates for various counties or halves of the state, and you can look that stuff up and everything. I just thought it was fascinating and interesting when I've got birds that are either resident birds or birds that arrive, breed, and leave, or those that are just migrants. I can get a really cool idea. The longer you yard bird, the more data that you have in here, you can get some really cool views of stuff in it. So you can see, you know, stuff in here like blue jays and crows next to one another. I get them all year round, pretty much have an uninterrupted line of crow all year long in it. But just kind of a neat little feature, thought it was worth looking at. You can also get this in your patch totals. So if you've set up a special list or lists like I have, I've got my Minnesota State Parks list, which is all the state parks in one patch, because I just love to track, you know, these similar groupings and stuff. I've got my Lake Elmo Regional Park, but Inwood Hood. So I've got it's my home and the neighborhood listing in that. So a little bit broader data set for me. And then I can get a little bit better idea of, you know, have the gaps filled in if it's just in the neighborhood or whatever it might be. But just, you know, fun stuff to do. Wanted to mention it, thought it was, you know, worth bringing up. And this is an event. So I had a group set up that was for this year, individuals that might be interested in hiking long distances with me or taking part in specific big watch, big sit events at specific parks and locations. And obviously everything has changed. Everything is different. So I started to think, well, what could I do? What things could I maybe do to pull people into some type of event, but still respect the social guidelines out there? Because I think the term social distancing probably isn't 100% correct. It's not isolation. It's not stop talking to people. It's just stop meeting, stop, you know, having gatherings and groupings and stuff like that in person. But it doesn't mean you can't, you know, do other things. And so that with that spirit of that, I put this group together. So let me create or open this up. So obviously you can pause this if you need to and you want to read through this stuff. So what I did was I created a yard program with some modified rules to it, effectively saying, let's create some guidelines. Anybody that's interested, we can start bird watching at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I wanted pre-dawn to be an option, and go all the way to 8 p.m. Come and go as you please, and we'll create a messenger group, a Facebook Messenger chat group, which I named and then added everybody to that said, I'm in, I want to be a part of this, I'm going to your event, and I, you know, going in air quotes as far as participating. So I created that group the night before, tested it, everything worked, got up in the morning and started birding at 6 a.m. And the first thing that did was gave me the idea that we talked about at the very beginning of this video about setting a new routine, regularity or whatever, and this got me getting up early in the morning and going for that walk in the morning. This very first day of this event, I was thinking to myself, well, what birds could I get in pre-dawn? Because I never bird pre-dawn at home, other than I go out in the driveway, get in the car and leave, and maybe I hear killdeer or something talking in the morning. Generally don't make much of a note of it. I started to think, I'm like, well, maybe there's an outside chance if I get far enough down the edge of the neighborhood and can still see my house, because that was another part of this, is that you have to have line of sight to your home. So you can stretch your legs during the day. It's a home watch, home sit, but you can stretch your legs, and as long as you can still see your house, you can count the bird. So I was thinking, well, maybe I can get American woodcock. And the humorous part of this whole thing is I got up, got dressed. It was right at 6 a.m., opened the patio door, closed it behind me, and walked right out the backyard to 5th Street on the other side of our berm. And before I even hit the sidewalk, I heard an American woodcock painting out in the scrubby lot across the street. So that's their favorite dancing ground. So I literally found a dancing ground for an American woodcock within earshot of my own home. I'd just never put myself in the position to hear it before. I'm going to move this up in case anybody was looking to pause and read any of the rest of this stuff. So what I ended up doing with this program was just, let's try and get everybody to de-stress a little bit and have some kind of a fun event where we can text back and forth all day long. People started sending photographs throughout the day. We actually kept a mammal list while we were at it. My friend Pete Nichols, he was able to add a mink to that list. Just, fun stuff that we could do. Another friend, Kevin Manley, put a bird code in FCOC, and he was just being coy. It was his first cup of coffee of the day. And then 5-6 people in a row sent a photograph of their coffee cup because people were just sitting on their porches or sitting on the patio, the deck, whatever it might be, and had a cup of coffee and maybe a blanket because it was a bit chilly in the morning. Whereas others like me were out walking the neighborhood already. In fact, I walked the neighborhood 6 different times that day because I love to stretch my legs. I love to get, hike time in. And everybody just kind of participated as they could, found the opportunity to communicate, because a lot of us are very social and love to go bird watching together, and with that taken away, that can really take something away from your relationship. And it can be hard sometimes to make ourselves, okay, I got to text so and so and let them know I'm thinking of them and stuff, and that can be really difficult sometimes. But this event like this, we actually did, you can see it on screen, the went and maybe we did have 20 plus people throughout the day, and others posted on the event page itself that were interested but maybe didn't have great internet connection or whatever. And we got great birds all day long, and we rooted each other on to get this aggregate list put together. I was maintaining that list, and I would update people and say, hey, we still haven't gotten XYZ, and then people might have kept a closer eye or thought, okay, well, that's going to be a flyover only, so I'll watch the horizon if I can or get in position to do that. And the beautiful thing was is we have so many different diverse yards and yard spaces and neighborhoods. Some of the individuals in the group live in the city, like live in Minneapolis itself or St. Paul proper. There are a lot of greenways and green spaces, so individuals were, still within sight, and maybe were able to squeak out some birds that were just dropping in for the day and would move on. Other individuals, they're in apartment buildings, but still got some sight lines, from where their home is, and were able to kind of look down this street towards this, lot or closer to the river. We actually had Clinton and Christina up in Duluth were birding from their yard, but they were able to walk down the street 1 block, still seeing their home, look down the road towards the lake, so they could actually see a flyway along the lake, and they were picking up gulls for us. They got glaucus gull on the day, Thayer's subvariety of Iceland gull, and even had goshawk, northern goshawk in a flyover, because it's Duluth, of course you're going to get crazy stuff that can go. So this kind of aggregate yard list developed throughout the day with some amazing birds. Chris Moulton up in Pine County built a home recently with his family, and they're in the woods a bit deeper. They got us our only barred owl and only ruffed grouse of the day on it. And then we certainly had some even crazier stuff. In the one of the early segments, we talked about surf scoter, and then I'd be coming back to it. That surf scoter's on Lake Winona. That lake is visible from several points around town, but specifically because there's a lot of elevation down there. That's kind of blufflands in there. And Diedrich Benz, in a coy sort of manner, had intimated earlier in the week, I don't know what's reasonable and what's not. And actually, I think I got the picture right here on screen. Yeah, there it is. So what Diedrich had indicated was his home was the X, somewhere in that zone there, and then the lake is there. But then he indicated that if he were to go up to the top of hill nearby, which would be on the near side of this photo, that he would be able to see both. He would be able to see his home and he'd be able to see the lake. And like I said, he was being coy. He's like, I'm not the one to stretch the rules or whatever, but, and really more as a larf, a bit, just being funny myself, I started to kind of razz him a bit during the day and say, what we're really waiting for is for Diedrich to make the hike, so that he can get us a surf scooter for our, quote unquote yardless on the day. And to his credit, Diedrich grabbed the scope, grabbed the binoculars, and went for a walk. He got to the top of it. He recorded a little video, popped it to the group. And yes, he did get us our only surf scooter of the day, which was the only one in the entire state. And he was able to get us Ruddy Duck and I believe a couple of others. But, that was kind of the whole fun of this whole thing, is what unique thing could somebody put on your list? I mean, I had mentioned the city. Even Isay Varghese had, from his apartment area, was able to get to Rusty Blackbird. Now, Pete Nichols got Rusty Blackbird in his home, and he's got this awesome yard in southern Washington County. Isay's in the city, but he was still able to find good stuff. He got a couple of good kinglets as well. So we got Golden Crown and Ruby Crown kinglet on the day in it. I had mentioned Kevin Manley earlier because he was the finder of the eared grebe in Washington County. At his home in Dakota County, he was the only one to produce tufted titmouse and winter wren from his yard on the day. So just really super cool things. I think from an apartment building in Ramsey County, Dana Sterner was the first one to come up with an American kestrel on the day. I later saw one in my yard space. It might be even more likely. But what all of this did was stretch everyone's imagination a little bit and make people think, okay, well, how could I help the group? How could I add something more? Liz Harper throughout the day, she's over in Ramsey County as well. She was like the all-star of, I'm going to get a picture of this bird and make sure that we've got it. And she got us our only flyover double-crested cormorant and American white pelicans on the day. Got pictures of both of them. It was like the biggest unchecked boxes of the day, and Liz was able to get them because she kept watching the sky all day long. In fact, she got new all-time yard birds. She got red-breasted merganser flyover at her place as well. And it's all something most of us would not have done otherwise. Mostly we would have gone out birding somewhere, or maybe we would have listened to a few birds for 45 minutes in the morning while having a cup of coffee or iced tea or something, and then just moved on to something else. But I just wanted to talk about this. I thought it was super fun. I didn't know what it would be when I put it together. I didn't know how it would come out, but it was absolutely amazing. I plan on doing more and inviting, more of my friends and, loose associates or whatever, and putting this kind of thing together and creating an aggregate list. And I'll probably tweak the rule set a bit too. Instead of maybe doing line of sight, maybe I'll do a radius. So if you see it within 2 or 3 mile radius of your home, so it kind of gives you a broader area, a little longer walk if you want to go for a walk, or you can just stay at home. Just a great way to communicate with your friends, keep something social going during this really challenging time for everybody. And who knows, you could do it during the week, with friends that, if you've got friends that are retired, or if you've got kids in other families, nephews, nieces, whatever it might be, you could put something together if anybody's even remotely interested in birding and say, well, what are you seeing in your yard? Here's what I'm seeing in my yard. And just ways to share and ways to do something a bit different, have a bit of fun, and kind of make this, whatever we can make it. So that's pretty much all I have for this week. Encourage everyone to think about your yard, think about programs, talked about some of the rarities and stuff, and hope everybody goes out and checks out some of these resources and gets to know them a little bit better. The last item I had on my list, Timothy Walker had made a comment on one of the videos, and I do want to reference it. He'd recommended looking into the MOU website because it's really deep, and he is correct. There's a lot of stuff on the MOU website, and I do plan to cover MOU website stuff. There's some talk that there may be some redesign going on in the future of the website, but I still think it's worth it, and it won't be wasted time if we jump into that, because I think there are resources in there that people could benefit from and have a lot of fun with. And even if things change in the future, it'd be a great way to both use and utilize eBird, and then also consider the benefits of the MOU website and maybe use them both. And that's actually something that I do, and there are ways to work through that. So something to look forward to into the future. It could probably be an entire dedicated episode or 2 or 3 because there is a lot in there. You've seen me go in there almost every episode for something, but we'll maybe dig in a bit deeper because there's a lot less tutorial materials on that, and it's something that could maybe get us some greater exposure and viewing in that space. So until next week, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please provide comments. Email me. I read everything that I get. I will include them as much as I can in future videos, and I do want these to be beneficial to everybody. Happy birding and stay safe out there, everyone.